My neighbor threw an orchid in the trash. I took it home and poured 1 teaspoon of something everyone has in their kitchen into the pot. 3 days later, the orchid bloomed so beautifully that my neighbor came running over and demanded it back. But I'll show you exactly what I poured in there. It sounds like a fairy tale. I get it. I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But before we get into the specifics, let me introduce myself to those of you who are here for the first time. Hi, this is a channel where I show that you don't need a garden center, expensive products, or a degree in botany to have a beautiful garden and a lush windowsill. What you do need is a little bit of knowledge, a pinch of curiosity, and as it turns out today, literally what you have on hand in your kitchen. In today's episode, I'll show you 5 natural fertilizers that can resurrect even a plant that most of us would have given up on. 5 ingredients, 0 chemicals, 0 expenses at the garden center. Everything you need is sitting in your kitchen, in your cabinet, or in your fridge right now. And the results? You'll see the results with your own eyes because I've prepared a time-lapse video for you of a plant that looked like a candidate for the compost bin, and 3 weeks later looked like it had just returned from a spa. But first things first, let's start with the story that ignited my interest in this topic. A few months ago, I visited my aunt in Krakow. On her kitchen windowsill sat geraniums, so thick, lush, and covered in flowers that they looked like they were straight out of a catalog. I asked her what fertilizer she uses. She smiled and said, "I haven't bought any fertilizer for 15 years. I water them with whatever is left in the pot." I thought she was joking. Then I saw her watering a geranium with the water left over from boiling rice, and I almost dropped my teacup. I started digging into the topic, looking for studies, talking to people who have been using home methods for years, and it turned out that science backs up many of these grandmotherly tricks. It's just that no one talks about it out loud because you can't make money off it like you can with a 35 zloty bottle of fertilizer. Today I'm bringing these secrets to light. Ready? Let's go. Top 1. Rice water. Let's start with something that most of you probably pour straight down the drain without even thinking about it. The water in which rice was boiled. Just an ordinary, cloudy, slightly sticky liquid that looks like dirty water and smells, well, like rice. Nothing special, right? And yet this unassuming liquid is a true nutritional bomb for plants. And this isn't just my opinion. It's backed by research. Scientists from a university in Bangkok conducted an experiment comparing the growth of plants watered with regular tap water and rice water. The difference after 4 weeks was visible to the naked eye. Plants watered with rice water had lusher leaves, thicker stems, and a better developed root system. Why does this happen? Because when you boil rice, 3 things that plants love leach into the water. First, starch. Starch is to soil microorganisms what sugar is to yeast. It feeds beneficial bacteria and fungi that break down organic matter in the soil and make nutrients available to plants. The more beneficial microorganisms, the more alive and healthier the soil, and healthy soil means a healthy plant. Second, potassium. This is one of the 3 main macronutrients that plants need in the largest quantities. Potassium is responsible for water transport in plant tissues. It regulates the opening and closing of stomata, those tiny pores on the leaves through which the plant breathes, and strengthens disease resistance. Third, small amounts of phosphorus and nitrogen, which also support growth. How do you prepare it? Very simply. You boil rice as usual, white or brown, doesn't matter. And instead of pouring the water down the drain, you pour it into a bowl or a jar. You set it aside to cool. This is important. Never water plants with hot water because boiling the roots is the one thing we don't want here. Once the water cools to room temperature, you simply water the plant with it. You can do this once a week or once every 2 weeks. Don't overdo the frequency because excess starch can attract gnats. And here's a little tip from my aunt in Krakow, whom I mentioned at the beginning. She doesn't boil rice specifically for the plants. She simply collects the water and waters them every time she makes a dinner with rice. No effort, no extra work. And that is the beauty of natural fertilizers. They don't require a special trip to the store or a separate budget. You use what would have ended up in the sink anyway. One more thing. Rice water works great for orchids, ferns, peace lilies, and most houseplants. If you grow herbs on your windowsill, mint, basil, rosemary, they will also gladly accept this boost. And now I'll tell you something that might surprise you. This method is not a new discovery. In Southeast Asia, farmers have been using rice water for hundreds of years. In Japan, there is a traditional technique for irrigating rice paddies where water from one field is transferred to another to carry beneficial microorganisms along with it. You are doing the exact same thing in miniature when you water the geranium on your windowsill. Beautiful, isn't it? Top 2. Coffee grounds. And now for something that many of you have probably already tried. But beware, I'm almost certain that a good portion of you are doing it wrong. And this mistake can literally kill your plants. Coffee grounds. It seems simple. You drink your coffee, you dump the grounds into the pot. The end. And that's exactly where the problem begins. But first, why are coffee grounds good for plants in the first place? Because they are rich in nitrogen, and nitrogen is the basic building block of plant proteins. Without nitrogen, a plant cannot produce chlorophyll, the green pigment responsible for photosynthesis. A plant with a nitrogen deficiency has pale yellowing leaves, grows poorly, and looks as if life has drained out of it. Coffee grounds provide nitrogen in an organic form, which means it is released slowly as the grounds break down in the soil. It's like feeding the plant through an IV drip instead of a single injection. But that's not all. The grounds also contain magnesium, potassium, and copper. And their slightly acidic pH, and pay attention here, this is the key phrase, slightly acidic, makes them fantastic for acid-loving plants. Like what? For example, hydrangeas, azaleas, rhododendrons, blueberries, heathers, ferns, and yes, you guessed it, orchids. And now we come to that critical mistake I mentioned. If you take wet grounds straight from the coffee maker and pour a thick layer on top of the soil in the pot, stop immediately. Because do you know what happens? Wet grounds on the soil surface form a dense, impermeable layer that blocks air from reaching the roots. And roots, contrary to what some people think, need to breathe. Without access to oxygen, they start to rot, and rotting roots are basically a death sentence for a plant. So how do you do it right? You have two options. Option 1, drying. You spread the grounds in a thin layer on a newspaper or a baking sheet and leave them for a day or two until they dry out. You then mix the dry grounds with the soil in the pot, ideally when repotting, or gently rake them into the top layer of the soil. The proportions? No more than 10 to 15% of the total soil volume. Any more is too much. Option 2, composting. You throw the grounds into the compost bin where they mix with other organic waste and break down in a controlled manner. Finished compost with coffee grounds is one of the best fertilizers you can give your plants. What should you absolutely not do? Do not sprinkle grounds under plants that like alkaline or neutral soil. Lavender, for example. Sprinkling grounds under lavender is like giving a chocolate bar with nuts to someone with a nut allergy. It seems like a small thing, but the effect is catastrophic. Lavender in acidic soil wastes away, turns yellow, stops blooming, and eventually dies. Other plants you're better off not feeding with coffee grounds: geraniums, cacti, succulents, and most Mediterranean herbs: thyme, sage, oregano. And one more thing, gnats. Wet grounds on the soil surface attract fungus gnats, those tiny black flies that hover around pots and can drive you crazy. Drying the grounds before use practically eliminates this problem. A question for you. Has anyone here made this mistake with wet grounds? I did it for years, and it wasn't until I lost a beautiful fern that I started looking for the cause. It turned out that it was the coffee grounds, or rather my method of applying them, that killed the roots. A costly lesson, but an invaluable one. Top 3. Banana peel water. Okay, moving on. This is my personal favorite. When I first heard about fertilizing plants with banana peel water, I thought, all right, this is going too far. Next, someone will tell me that plants also like mango smoothies. But then I tried it, and I have to say, the results surprised me so much that I've been doing it regularly ever since. Why banana peels? Because the banana is one of the most potassium-rich plants we eat on a daily basis. And potassium, as I mentioned with the rice water, is one of the 3 pillars of plant nutrition. It's even called the quality element because it improves the taste of fruit, the intensity of flower color, and the overall vitality of the plant. A plant with a potassium deficiency has ugly browning leaf edges, blooms poorly, and is susceptible to all kinds of infections. But that's not all. Banana peels also contain phosphorus, the second of the big three macronutrients, which is responsible for root development and blooming. They also contain calcium, magnesium, and manganese. It's like a multi-ingredient vitamin cocktail for your plants, and it costs you as much as a banana peel that you were going to throw away anyway. How do you prepare banana water? There are a few ways, but I'll show you the simplest and most effective one. You take 2 to 3 peels from ripe bananas. The riper the banana, the more brown spots on the peel, the better, because such peels have more potassium. You throw them into a jar or pitcher and pour a liter of water over them. You set it aside for 24 to 48 hours. After this time, the water should have a slightly brown color. This is a sign that the minerals from the peels have leached into the solution. You strain out the peels, which you can then throw into the compost, and you're done. You have a homemade potassium fertilizer. You water your plants with it once every 2 weeks. Not more often, because like with everything in life, too much of a good thing is harmful. Now let's compare this to store-bought potassium fertilizer. A popular bottle of liquid potassium fertilizer at the garden center costs on average 15 to 30 zlotys. It lasts for a few weeks of watering. Banana water costs you literally 0 zlotys because you're buying the bananas to eat anyway. Over a year, if you have, say, 15 houseplants, you save 100 to 200 zlotys. It might not be a fortune, but tell me, would you rather spend that money at the garden center or on something more enjoyable? One more tip. If you want a turbo version, you can cut the banana peels into pieces, dry them in the sun or in the oven at a low temperature, and grind them into a powder in a blender. You then sprinkle this powder by the teaspoon into the pot and mix it with the top layer of soil. It works slower, but lasts longer. The potassium is released gradually, feeding the plant for many weeks. For which plants is banana water best? Primarily for those that bloom heavily. Roses, geraniums, syrphinias, orchids, begonias, but also tomatoes. If you grow tomatoes on your balcony or in your garden, banana water is an absolute revelation. Potassium improves the taste of the fruit and speeds up ripening. Since I started feeding them this way, my tomatoes taste like the ones from my childhood, straight from my grandpa's garden patch. Top 4, yeast. And here we come to something that will seem completely crazy to many people. Yeast. Yes, the same yeast you use for pizza dough, breakfast rolls, or homemade bread. And before you think he's gone mad, let me reassure you, there is science behind this. Yeast are single-celled fungi of the genus Saccharomyces, and when added to the soil dissolved in water at the right concentration, amazing things start to happen. First, yeast stimulates the development of beneficial soil microorganisms. Soil is not dead matter, it's a living ecosystem full of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and small invertebrates. All these organisms work together to break down organic matter and make mineral nutrients available to plants. Yeast, being fungi, fit into this ecosystem and strengthen it. Research published in the Journal of Plant Nutrition showed that watering plants with a yeast solution increases root biomass by up to 30% compared to a control group. Second, yeast produces biologically active substances, including B vitamins and auxins, which are natural plant growth hormones. That's why plants watered with yeast literally explode with growth. I've seen it with my own eyes. My chili pepper plant, which had been sitting on the windowsill for 3 months and practically not growing at all, put out 8 new shoots within 2 weeks after 2 waterings with a yeast solution. 8. How do you prepare the solution? You need 1 cube of fresh yeast, 100 gram, or 1 packet of dry yeast, 7 g. You dissolve the yeast in a liter of warm, not hot, water. Warm means roughly 35 to 40 degrees Celsius, 95 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. You add a tablespoon of sugar. Sugar is food for the yeast. It kickstarts the fermentation process. You stir it and leave it for 2 to 3 hours until the solution starts to foam slightly. Then you dilute 1 liter of this concentrate into 10 liters of water and water your plants. This is important. The proportions must be maintained. A yeast solution that is too concentrated can acidify the soil and damage the roots. Remember 1 to 10 and use it no more than once a month. Did you know that this method has deep roots in Polish gardening tradition? My grandmother from Silesia used yeast on her cucumbers and tomatoes since the 1950s. She used to say that it was feeding the soil, not the plant, and she was absolutely right, because yeast acts precisely on the soil, not directly on the plant. It strengthens the ecosystem in which the plant lives, instead of artificially feeding it. This is the fundamental difference between natural and synthetic fertilizers. And one more important caveat: yeast absorbs calcium from the soil during the fermentation process. Therefore, if you use yeast, it's worth replenishing the calcium from time to time, for example, with crushed eggshells. But more on eggs in a moment, because that's our fifth ingredient. Yeast works fantastically for tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, strawberries, as well as for houseplants that have stalled in growth and look tired of life. If you have a ficus on your windowsill that hasn't put out a single new leaf in 6 months, try yeast. You might be truly surprised. Here I have to tell you about my personal experience, because it best illustrates the power of this ingredient. 3 months ago, I received a Monstera deliciosa from a friend that looked, to put it mildly, pathetic. 3 pale, wilted leaves, dry tips, soil as hard as a rock. My friend said she bought it a year earlier and had tried everything. Store-bought fertilizers, repotting, using a grow light. Nothing helped. I took it home, repotted it in fresh soil, watered it with a yeast solution, and placed it in a bright spot away from direct sunlight. After 10 days, a new leaf appeared. After 3 weeks, it already had 2 new leaves and had clearly regained its color. Today, 3 months later, that same Monstera has 11 leaves and looks like it belongs on the cover of an interior design magazine. Think about it. How many times have you thrown away a plant that simply needed the right stimulus? How many times have you gone to the store for a new one instead of trying to save the old one for a few pennies? I did it myself for years, and I regret it. Top 5. Egg boiling water. And finally, something that perfectly rounds out our set of 5 kitchen fertilizers: the water from boiling eggs. You probably make hard-boiled eggs at least once a week, for breakfast, for a salad, for a sandwich, and every time you pour out the water they were boiled in. But this water is a true treasure. Why? Because an eggshell consists of 96% calcium carbonate. When you boil an egg, some of this calcium leaches into the water. Besides calcium, small amounts of magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, and even trace amounts of iron and zinc also enter the solution. Calcium is incredibly important for plants. It is responsible for building cell walls. It's like the cement that holds the cells together and gives the plant its structure. A plant with a calcium deficiency has soft, floppy stems, curled or deformed young leaves, and a tendency for its fruit to crack. If you grow tomatoes, you probably know that frustrating disease called blossom end rot. Dark, sunken spots at the bottom of the fruit. That's a classic symptom of calcium deficiency. How do you prepare egg water as a fertilizer? It's probably the simplest recipe in the world. You boil eggs as usual in a pot of water without salt. This is crucial. Without salt, because salt in the soil is a disaster. When the eggs are done, you take them out and set the water aside to cool. And that's it. Once it cools down, you water your plant with it. You can do this once a week. It's a safe frequency for most houseplants. And if you want an enhanced version, collect the shells from the eggs you've eaten, crush them into a fine powder in a mortar or blender, and sprinkle them into your pots. The shells break down slowly, releasing calcium over many weeks. It's a fantastic way to prevent calcium deficiency, especially for tomatoes, peppers, and zucchini. When does egg water work best? For plants that like slightly alkaline or neutral soil, so lavender, rosemary, thyme, geraniums, and most vegetables. It's the opposite of coffee grounds. That's why you should never use coffee grounds and egg water simultaneously for the same plant, because the effects cancel each other out. When is it better to skip it? For acid-loving plants, azaleas, hydrangeas, blueberries, heathers. These plants don't need extra calcium, and raising the soil's pH can harm them. And one more important thing, do not use water in which you boiled eggs with added vinegar. Some people add vinegar to the boiling water so the eggs don't crack. Vinegar changes the chemical composition of the solution and can harm your plants. Pure water, no salt, no vinegar, only that way. Let's see what we have. 5 ingredients that each of us has in the kitchen. Number 1, rice boiling water. Starch, potassium. Support for soil microorganisms. Ideal for orchids, ferns, and peace lilies. Once a week or two. Number 2, coffee grounds. Nitrogen, magnesium, acidic pH. Fantastic for acid-loving plants, but dried and mixed with the soil. Never wet on top. No more than 15% of the soil volume. Number 3, banana water. Potassium, phosphorus, calcium. Best for flowering plants and tomatoes once every 2 weeks. Number 4, yeast. Stimulation of microorganisms, auxins, B vitamins. A Polish grandmother's trick confirmed by science. Once a month. Dilution 1 to 10. Number 5, egg boiling water. Calcium and micronutrients. Ideal for plants that like neutral or alkaline soil. Once a week without salt and without vinegar. 5 ingredients, 0 chemicals, the kitchen instead of the store. And now for what I promised at the beginning, the proof. 3 weeks ago, I picked up a peace lily that looked like someone had put it on a radiator and forgotten about it for a month. The leaves hung down like wet laundry. 3 out of 5 were already brown. The soil was pulling away from the sides of the pot, bone dry. It looked hopeless. Most people would have thrown it away without a second thought. But I decided to conduct an experiment. For 3 weeks, I cared for this peace lily exclusively using the home methods I just showed you, and I recorded the whole process. Day 1, I repotted the plant into fresh substrate. I cut off the completely dry leaves. 2 were left, pale and limp. I watered it generously with rice boiling water. Day 3, the leaves lifted slightly. It wasn't anything spectacular, but the difference was visible. The plant was drinking. That's a good sign. Day 5, I added a bit of dried coffee grounds to the soil. The peace lily likes slightly acidic soil. I mixed it into the top layer. Day 7, the first new leaf, a tiny rolled up light green spike emerging from the center of the plant. I couldn't believe it was the same specimen that looked like it belonged in the trash a week earlier. Day 10, I watered it with banana water. The new leaf began to unfurl. The old leaves regained some color. Day 14, I watered it with a yeast solution, diluted 1 to 10, just as I explained. And here something amazing began. Day 17, 2 more new leaves emerged from the center of the plant. The old leaves, the 2 that survived, were now dark green and glossy. The plant looked as if someone had swapped it out in the night. Day 20, I watered it gently with egg water to balance out the slight acidification from the coffee grounds. Day 21, the end of the experiment. You can see the result in the time-lapse video currently on the screen. The peace lily, which 3 weeks ago was a candidate for the trash bin, now has 5 healthy leaves, a springy stem, and looks as if it has been sitting in that spot forever. And here I want to tell you something important. As my personal takeaway from this experiment and from many years of dealing with plants, I no longer believe in dead plants. Over the years, I've thrown away dozens of plants that I considered lost causes. Today, I know that most of them could have survived. They only needed 3 things: fresh soil, the right nutrients, and a little patience. Nature is incredibly resilient. Plants want to live, they want to grow, they want to bloom. You just have to give them a chance in the right conditions. The second takeaway I want to share with you: we don't need an industry to feed our plants. Everything we need, we have on hand. Our grandmothers and grandfathers always knew this. Somewhere along the way, between the ads for miracle products and the colorful shelves in garden centers, we forgot about these simple, proven methods. It's time to return to them. And now I have a few more additional tips before we wrap up today's episode. First, the schedule. Don't use all 5 ingredients at once, and don't flood your plants with fertilizers every other day. A plant also needs time to calmly absorb what it has been given. My suggested rotation looks like this. In the first week of the month, rice water. In the second week, banana water. In the third week, yeast. But remember, only once a month. So every other month, you can swap the yeast for egg water. In the fourth week, plain water. Yes, regular tap water, ideally left to sit for 24 hours so the chlorine can evaporate. Plants also need a break from fertilizing, just as we need a break from eating. This is called a cycle, and a cycle is the foundation of healthy gardening. Second observation, no article, no YouTube video, and no advice from an aunt in Krakow can replace your attentiveness. Look at your plants every day when you walk past the windowsill. Take a glance to see if the leaves look healthy, if there are any spots, discoloration, dry edges, or if the soil is moist or dry. Plants communicate with you. You just need to learn their language, and this language is simpler than you think. Yellow leaves usually mean too much water or too little nitrogen. Brown tips mean the air is too dry or there's too much fertilizer. Pale leaves mean too little light. Dropping leaves mean thermal stress, water stress, or transplant shock. You just have to listen. Third, water. It sounds trivial, but over half of the problems with houseplants stem from improper watering. Too much water kills more plants than too little. Remember that. Before you water, stick your finger about an inch, 2 mm into the soil. If it's wet, don't water. Simple, yet it saves the lives of thousands of plants. And have you ever wondered why grandmother's plants always looked better than ours? My theory is this. Grandmothers didn't have Google, they didn't have garden centers on every corner, and they didn't have hundreds of products promising miracles on a stick. What they did have was attentiveness, patience, and a sense that a plant is a living creature, not a decoration to be swapped out every season. Maybe we should return to that approach. And one more thing, the issue of safety. All 5 ingredients I discussed today are safe for humans, pets, and children. They are natural food substances. You don't have to worry about your cat licking soil fertilized with yeast or your child touching a pot with coffee grounds. This is another huge advantage over synthetic fertilizers, many of which are toxic upon direct contact. I'll tell you about one more aspect that is rarely discussed in materials about natural fertilizing, but which I think is incredibly important. It's about the long-term impact on the soil. Synthetic fertilizers, the ones in colorful bottles, act like a shot of adrenaline. The plant reacts quickly, but the soil loses its natural fertility over time. Mineral salts from artificial fertilizers accumulate in the substrate, destroy the soil structure, and kill beneficial microorganisms. After a few seasons of intensive synthetic fertilizing, the soil becomes barren like sand on a beach, only with even worse water retention properties. Natural fertilizers work the opposite way. By feeding the soil, and not just the plant, they build fertility with every application. Rice starch feeds bacteria. Coffee grounds improve soil structure. Yeast stimulates the ecosystem. With each passing month, your pot becomes a better place for the plant to live. It's a bit like the difference between eating fast food and cooking at home. Both will feed you, but one builds health and the other destroys it. Research conducted at the University of Agriculture in Krakow showed that soil fertilized exclusively with organic substances for 5 years had twice the microbiological activity of synthetically fertilized soil. And higher microbiological activity means better availability of nutrients, better water retention, and greater plant resistance to diseases and pests. These are not marginal differences. This is a fundamental change in the quality of the substrate. And so we get to the heart of the philosophy I'm trying to convey. Gardening is not a fight against nature. It's a collaboration with it. Instead of pouring synthetics and hoping for a miracle, give the soil what it needs, and it will repay you 100-fold. Instead of throwing away a wilted plant and buying a new one, give it a chance. A handful of simple ingredients and 3 weeks of patience. You'll be surprised how much life there is in something that looks dead. Finally, I want to mention a few common questions I get in the comments. Can I mix all the ingredients together and water with one concoction? The answer is no. Each ingredient has different properties in different optimal conditions. Mixing them can lead to unforeseen reactions. For example, yeast in an acidic environment with coffee grounds behaves differently than in neutral water. Use them separately in rotation. Do these methods also work in the garden, not just in pots? Absolutely yes, and even better, because in open soil the microbiological ecosystem is richer and responds more readily to natural stimuli. The only difference is the quantities. In the garden, you need proportionally more, but the principle is the same. Can I store the prepared solutions? Rice water and egg water, yes, for 2 to 3 days in the fridge. Banana water is best used within 24 hours because it ferments quickly and starts to smell unpleasant. Use the yeast solution immediately after preparation when the yeast is active. Can I use these methods in the winter? Yes, but less frequently. In winter, most houseplants slow down their metabolism and enter a dormant phase. They need less water and fewer nutrients. Cut the fertilizing frequency in half. For example, give rice water every 2 weeks instead of every week, and yeast every 2 months instead of every month. And that would be it for today. 5 natural fertilizers that can resurrect even a plant that others have already thrown in the trash. Rice water, coffee grounds, banana water, yeast and egg water. Zero chemicals, zero expenses, 100% nature. Let me know in the comments which of these 5 methods surprised you the most. Maybe it's the yeast because who would have thought a pizza ingredient could save a monstera? Or maybe the rice water, which you've been pouring down the drain for years, not knowing it's liquid gold for plants? And if you have your own grandmother's trick for a homemade fertilizer, some hack passed down in your family from generation to generation, be sure to share it. We learn from each other. And I know there are plenty of people among you with invaluable gardening knowledge that deserves to be told. If this story changed the way you look at the plants in your home, subscribe to our channel and like this video. We uncover the secrets of nature that others have tried to hide. Take care of your green future and nurture life in every corner of your garden. Another treasure trove of knowledge will be opened very soon. See you in the next episode.